Thank you for joining us here on Indianapolis This Week as we continue to lead Indiana's best political coverage through Election Day and beyond. And we begin this week with the race for the White House, another tumultuous week for the Trump-Pence campaign out there. On Tuesday, Donald Trump took heat for what Speaker Ryan called a joke gone bad, one that many people around the country, including a lot of Republicans, saw as a call for violence against Hillary Clinton. He followed that up later this week with repeated comments saying that President Obama and Hillary Clinton founded ISIS.
If she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But I call President Obama and Hillary Clinton the founders of ISIS. They're the founders. In fact, I think we'll give Hillary Clinton the, if you're on a sports team, most valuable player, MVP. You get the MVP award. ISIS will hand her the most valuable player award. Her only competition is Barack Obama.
Those comments have meant another week spent clarifying the top of the ticket for Indiana Governor Mike Pence, spending part of each day explaining what his running mate meant and turning blame toward the media. ABC's Inez de la Cuetara is following Mike Pence out on the campaign trail for us.
That's right, Jason. Mike Pence this week is cleaning up after Trump yet again saying his Second Amendment remarks were misinterpreted, and this time he's going after the media pretty hard.
You know, the media is like one day after another. It's just about every day they latch onto some new issue about my running mate. You know, it's just about every hour there's something new they're talking about. And it's amazing. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, they're so busy parsing every word Donald Trump said in the last 30 minutes, they've been ignoring what the Clintons have been doing for the last 30 years.
And Jason Pence on Thursday implied Trump saying Obama is the founder of ISIS was, quote, another controversy over semantics. He argued it is Clinton and Obama that are to blame for the vacuum that helped lead to ISIS, which has some remarking that Pence has become a Trump translator. Jason?
Inez, thank you. If current polls hold true and Trump loses in November, many are wondering whether Mike Pence's spot on the ticket will cause permanent damage to his own political future going forward. Politico took a close look at that this week. The headline there, saving Mike Pence. It suggests this year's presidential race is all but over and that allies of Governor Pence right now are worried the remainder of the campaign could spell the end of his own political future. Let's welcome in Matt Nussbaum now with Politico, who wrote that article. Matt, thanks for being here. Good to see you.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Does Mike Pence need political saving right now?
Well, I think no one would say that this last week has been a good week for the Trump campaign. So obviously, while some Republicans, the Paul Ryans, the Mitch McConnells of the world, can kind of distance themselves from Donald Trump, Governor Pence doesn't have that option. He continues to defend Donald Trump's statements. He continues to stand by him. And that's what he has to do as running mate. That's kind of the role. So the question is, if the poll numbers keep trending down and if Donald Trump is headed towards a defeat in November, which it looks like now, does that potentially jeopardize Governor Pence's future? And I think that might be a worry among some in Pence world.
You have been out on the road with the governor. He had to have known going into this that this was a high-risk, high-reward situation.
Mm-hmm. You know, as you know, he was facing a tough but certainly winnable re-election race here in Indiana. And I think the opportunity to be on a national ticket is something that's really hard to turn down, especially for a politician whose career has been trending upward for so long as his has. And he's been effective out on the trail. He's getting good crowds. It's certainly a different kind of crowd than Donald Trump draws. It's not these big stadium-filling rallies, but he's holding town hall events. He's been standing up for the candidate and sort of pushing that message in a language that conservatives can understand more. It's not the bombastic kind of Trumpian style, but he's pushing a more traditional conservative kind of message out on the trail that seems to be resonating with the evangelical vote that he obviously has relied on for a long time.
Through Trump's recent political turmoil, his favorables, the governors, are still relatively high, all things considered. So he's done a fine job, apparently, navigating that fine line.
Yeah, so he's still got more people view him favorably than unfavorably, while a lot of people still don't have an opinion of him. But certainly in this race, where both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have such high unfavorable ratings, that's definitely notable. And he's a likable guy. Like I said, it's the more soft-spoken kind of style. It's not the insult-throwing style that Donald Trump has been using. So I think if he can kind of maintain that likability, maintain his own style and his distinct persona, I think that would go a long way in maybe protecting him from some of the fallout. But again, at the end of the day, he's going to be tied to Donald Trump more than probably any other politician in America, and at least for now is continuing to stand by the candidate and try to explain some of these more controversial comments that have been coming out in the past week or so.
You spoke to a lot of people for this article, including a former pastor, and I found that very insightful. His take so far on Governor Pence out on the trail.
Well, what he told me was that I spoke with him a few days after Governor Pence was first elected, and he told me that he was concerned having Governor Pence on the ticket with Donald Trump, but that he trusted Governor Pence to stand by, his morals and his integrity would remain intact. And I think that's what a lot of people who know the governor, who have worked with the governor, say, that they're not worried about him compromising his principles in the course of this race. And I think maybe to some outside observers, there's some more questions about that, about what's being sacrificed to join Donald Trump on this ticket.
Matt Nussbaum from Politico. Safe travels. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it.
Good to see you. Back to Trump for a minute. Indiana Congressman Andre Carson says the GOP nominee is sabotaging himself in the election, specifically with those allegations about the president and ISIS.
It appears as if he knows he will not be the next president of the United States, so he's trying to sabotage this thing because he's not used to losing. It's clear when he sees poll numbers declining, he's crying like a baby, and what you're seeing is not a meltdown, but someone who's trying to sabotage himself to clear the way for President Clinton.
Carson also blasted Trump for his comments about the U.S. involvement in NATO. He says any threat to abandon the alliance empowers terrorist groups like ISIS. Mary Beth Schneider, Pete Seif for the Republicans, and Adam Kirsch for the Democrats as well. Let's start our discussion today with Donald Trump. Very active on Twitter, no surprise. The GOP nominee tweeting on Friday about his repeated comments calling President Obama the founder of ISIS. He tweeted, CNN reports so seriously that I call President Obama and Clinton the founder of ISIS and MVP. They don't get sarcasm? As someone who doesn't get sarcasm, get it? Sarcastic. Let's talk about it. Mary Beth, lead it off for us.
I think one of the people who doesn't get sarcasm is Donald Trump, because Hewitt, a conservative radio host, Hugh Hewitt, went out of his way to try to get Donald Trump to say, well, I am being, this is a metaphor, they left a vacuum, and that allowed for the rise of ISIS. And he says, no, I meant that literally. It is unbelievable. And then he continues to double down, and then when this is his MO. He says something crazy, and then it flares up, and then he'll say, oh, I was joking, or that was just sarcasm. At some point, no, that's not sarcasm, that's you saying what you thought.
Pete, your take.
I agree. It is the predictable pattern of this campaign when there are negative stories about his polling or his operation from a structural standpoint, which he reads. He has a huge appetite for media.
He loves the polls.
Right?
He loves the polls.
He says something provocative to get attention, to bring the spotlight back on himself. He doubles down and then pretends like it never happened or it was a joke. He did it with the baby crying, right? He made that comment, which could very well have been a joke and intended that way, but it wasn't until 2 days later that he said it was a joke. And the story was already written, the die was already cast by then.
Adam, I feel we're about to go 3 for 3.
Absolutely. The problem is Donald Trump says something ridiculous, as Pete said. He says it then for another couple days, couple hours, whatever, and then everybody's like, no, you really can't say that. You can't call for somebody to assassinate President Clinton. Oh, I was joking. No, turns out that's wrong.
And, he started off on Friday morning saying the sarcasm line, and then in his appearances all through Friday, at least 9 or 10 times, he repeated it again. It is leaving, then he yells at reporters for lying because they have to say, actually, no, the president is not the founder of ISIS. This is not a way to run for president.
We heard from Politico's Matt Nussbaum earlier in the show, and he was talking about how Pence has done a fine job of navigating that fine line so far and being kind of a separate candidate than Donald Trump. But we also heard from Governor Pence earlier in the show, who is joining with Trump and going against the media full bore. Is that surprising at all, Pete?
Well, no, I think...
And Pence being a former member of the media himself, too.
Right. You know, the dichotomy you have here, what's interesting is Governor Pence is saying what he's saying about the media in front of these huge crowds that are very energetic, very passionate about Donald Trump, believe that the media is out to get him, that the whole system is rigged. He's giving them the red meat that they want to hear. But at the same time, Governor Pence is giving back access to media outlets that have lost it in the Trump campaign. The Washington Post, Politico, others are getting access to Mike Pence rallies that they don't get at Donald Trump rallies. So you have, you know, giving the people what they want to hear, but at the same time being very helpful to the media.
We heard from Congressman Carson talking about sabotage and saying that Trump is sabotaging his campaign at this point. Do you feel like he is sabotaging it? Adam?
I think Donald Trump was doomed from the start. He was a flawed candidate. Over a year ago, we sat on this couch and talked about, oh, it's a fad, it'll fade. And it hasn't yet. But it will. I think Congressman Carson was exactly right. Donald Trump's poll numbers are falling precipitously. We saw double-digit leads in Colorado, Virginia, 9 points in North Carolina, polling tight in Georgia and Arizona and Utah. These are not swing states traditionally. So I think Donald Trump's in trouble. I think Mike Pence has fallen in line totally with Donald Trump. He owns everything Donald Trump says. He's played janitor and mop-up man, but it doesn't work. He is part of the Trump campaign and will be for the rest of his life.
Let's get real hypothetical, Mary Beth. Is Donald Trump still on the ticket when we get to November?
Oh, yes. I don't see how you can remove him, and I don't see how he would remove himself. I don't think he's sabotaging his campaign. That smacks of kind of conspiracy theory stuff. But I think that Donald Trump thinks that what worked for him in the primaries will work in the general, and it's a completely different audience than the general. It does not work, and he's seeing the results. I don't see how at this point he wins, but you never know. Maybe Hillary Clinton will implode, which I suppose is possible.
We'll get to the current governor's race in a second. Let's focus, though, quickly on Governor Pence. And Pete, I want you to weigh in on this. Do you think he's done a good job of navigating that fine line?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would disagree, and I would say that he has been the Trump interpreter. He's the one who can message to people who don't speak populism, to people who are in the establishment, to social conservatives who just don't get Trump. Sometimes I'm one of those people who just doesn't get it, but I understand what Mike Pence is saying out on the campaign trail, and it's a very, very important role and an important messenger to have.
Quickly, I call it Trump-splaining.
There you go.
Trump-splaining,
right?
There you go. If Trump doesn't win in November, where do we see Pence next on a ballot?
I expect that he will be seeking the presidency himself in 2020. I do think, however, that will be difficult because he will be really linked with Donald Trump, and I think someone like John Kasich and even Ted Cruz, who pulled away, have a better shot.
All right, let's quickly turn now to the current governor's race. The news out on Friday, the Cook Political Report moving the Indiana governor's race to a toss-up from Republican-leaning. The group saying the campaign still in its infancy, with Eric Holcomb, of course, becoming the nominee last month, but they expect it to be very competitive going forward. Pete, you work for the Holcomb campaign. Adam, you're with the Democratic Party here. Mary Beth? Neither. So let's start with you. Is that fair? Is this a toss-up at this point?
It probably is at this point, but I do think that it has more to do with Eric Holcomb not being known. I think
is there enough time to get him known?
That's the big question. I actually think there is, but the clock is really going fast. I think that hurt them. This question about how much money they could get, they really, I think, needed to be out with some ads. I expect they will be soon. But the fact that John Gregg ran before and is not over 50% is hugely in Eric Holcomb's favor in a Republican-leaning state like Indiana.
Pete, Adam, anything to add?
I couldn't disagree more. People know who John Gregg is, and they like who John Gregg is. Eric Holcomb has said he is of one mind on every issue facing the state with Mike Pence. He is Mike Pence in different clothing. It turns out that he won in the Republican caucus based on, I'm going to get all of Pence's money, and, well, it turns out that's illegal. Also appears that they can't do the refund and give back scheme because it's got both federal and state campaign finance issues. Eric Holcomb hasn't issued a policy proposal. He hasn't said anything he's going to do other than he's going to continue the Mike Pence RFRA wages falling mission that he's been on for 4 years. Eric Holcomb's in trouble.
Quickly, let's give Pete the last word.
Yeah, there's way too much to unpack there. Eric Holcomb is not in trouble. John Gregg, who has been running for 243 weeks for governor of this state, can barely get above 40%. He didn't have a single poll in which he was leading Mike Pence, who he said was extremely unpopular. People do not like John Gregg, so I think that's a flawed analysis. The fact that Eric has been a candidate for less than 3 weeks and is only 6 points down in John Gregg's internal poll, he's in a good spot.
Adam, Pete, Mary Beth, out of time. Thanks for joining us. And welcome back to Indianapolis This Week as we turn to a struggle brewing at the State House, finding a replacement for the ISTEP test. There's a big concern right now that the panel tasked with recommending that new test won't meet their December 1st deadline. A top lawmaker on that committee is pushing for an end-of-year test that would be graded by Indiana's teachers. Our TV6 State House reporter Katie Hines is one-on-one with House Education Committee Chair Robert Boehning.
Do you think that teacher evaluations should be tied to the assessment?
I've been very open about how we should look at things. I think going into this commission, all of us need to be somewhat open. Even some of my colleagues, I've suggested to them coming in with a predetermined vision as to what it should look like. It shouldn't be where we are, because if we want to be as thoughtful and open to new ideas as possible, to come in with a preconceived idea doesn't work. In terms of, and I've also been fairly open about teacher evaluation, I think that we need to look at it a little bit more deeply. Right now, we hold teachers who teach ISTEP to a degree more accountable than those that don't teach ISTEP subjects. And it's only about 18 to 19% of our educators are teaching a subject that's tested by ISTEP. So it might make some sense to look at how we can look at using assessment or the growth of the student and have everybody held accountable. There's a model that I've been an advocate for a number of times called TAP, which deals with teachers' performance as well as overall school performance, and it holds teachers accountable for the total school performance, not just, and for the growth that those students are having. So every teacher, including a PE teacher, is responsible for making sure that math is moved forward in a student's life, or language arts. So, you integrate all of those important subjects and things that we're testing on into everything. So it's a little bit more of a team event as opposed to an individual type score. But I think to say that we want to totally decouple it probably doesn't make sense. I was very clear, and I think a lot of people don't understand that we're not asking in current law. It doesn't say that it's based on proficiency, it's based on growth. So we're holding teachers accountable based on how they start the student at the beginning of the year and how they basically end up at the end of the year. And then we also are, weighting of that is all a local decision. So we have some school districts that have 5%, then we have some that use 51%, but that's all determined at a local level. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about how ISTEP is being used in terms of that. But I think we need to be open. We did hear from a number of consultants said that it is possible to use ISTEP or an assessment of some sort for teacher accountability, for student accountability. You just need to make sure you create an assessment that has the function to do that.
There's been some criticism about the politics involved in this process. Can people be confident that the panel can achieve this goal?
I think there's I think the public can be confident that we can get together and make this happen. I unfortunately would agree there's been a little bit of politics. There's been opportunities for people to kind of grandstand and take positions that I think were probably inappropriate. I know that there was a signature drive and several other things. I thought it was unfortunate that that happened. But I think if you really pulled you take those that aren't maybe running for election off of this, and you pulled the people who are the educators and the teachers and parents, I think they would all say, we can make a difference, we can come together, let's try to put politics aside. And frankly, one thing that I think I told you earlier, that I was in Chicago this past week, which was the reason I wasn't able to be at the ISTEP Commission meeting, we released, NCSL, National Conference of State Legislators, released an international study of education, and I have been involved in that study for the last 18 months. And it was a collaborative effort where we brought the unions, educators, higher ed, everybody together, policymakers, in a debate to kind of figure out how can we take best practices from the rest of the world and put them in place in the United States. Because if you look at the data, the rest of the world seems to be moving a little bit farther along than we are. Our performance seems to be relatively flat. And so we were able to do it, and we obviously had different political there were 11 Republicans and 11 Democrats on this panel, and we were able to put politics aside and do what we thought was best and come up with a plan. I don't know why we can't do that here in Indiana.